Next I'd like to bring up or introduce our first keynote speaker, Manjusha Kulkarni, Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance, which serves and represents 1.6 million Asian and Pacific Islanders in Los Angeles County. In March 2020, Manju was the co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate, tracking COVID-related hate incidences against AAPIs. Manju and others have been recognized as honorees of the Time 100 Most Influential People and the Bloomberg list, and recipient of the 2021 Webby Social Movement of the Year Award and 2022 Forbes 50 Over 50 for her leadership in the Stop AAPI Hate movement. Please give a warm welcome to Manju.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and to the Manzanar committee for inviting me to join you today. It's a true honor and privilege to be part of the 54th annual Manzanar pilgrimage. But I want to first address the elephant in this space. No, I'm not a sweet Japanese confection. I know, for those of you who know, Manju, right, is a special treat, and so every time I meet a Japanese American, they say, "Oh, wait, you know that you're a Japanese confection, right?" And so and just a few minutes ago, somebody approached me with exactly that. I think that is part of the reason I feel so close to this community. And it is also some of the work I had an opportunity to do on behalf of Japanese Latin Americans. Before I begin, I want to just warn you that some of the remarks and the information that I share is going to be painful, and it's going to trigger negative feelings. These are reports that we have gotten from Stop AAPI Hate. I was waiting in line at a hardware store. A man cut in front of me, so I mentioned there was a line. He yelled at me, "Stupid effing chink. Go back to the country you came from. Do you effing speak English?" A direct quote, this incident was reported by a young Asian American woman in Los Angeles. I want to apologize for the offensive language. 11,000 such incidents. 11,000 that have been reported to Stop AAPI Hate since 2020. 11,000 against Otosans and Okasans. 11,000 aimed at our nanis and nanas. 11,000 hate incidents targeting our children. 11,000 individuals were incarcerated here in Manzanar. 11,000 Japanese Americans removed from their homes. 11,000 children, women, men forced into barracks just a few feet away from us. 11,000 who are miles away from the only life that they knew. Anti-Asian hate is not new. It did not begin with the COVID pandemic. It did not start with the attack on Pearl Harbor. It has been with us since the very founding of the United States. And this understanding led Russell Jung, Cynthia Che, and me to create Stop AAPI Hate and work to address the newest iterations of racism against our communities. The Naturalization Act of 1790 allowed only free white persons to naturalize, to become U.S. citizens. 85 years later came the Page Act, prohibiting Chinese women from coming to the United States. The misogynistic law labeled these women as unhygienic sex workers. It prevented Chinese families from settling in the U.S. and developing deep roots. In 1917, we saw the enactment of the Asiatic Barred Zone Act, an outright prohibition on all Asians from coming to America, expanding that of the Chinese Exclusion Act. And less than a decade later, in the 1920s, states like California passed alien land laws. Such legislation sought to prohibit immigrants who could not become U.S. citizens because of repressive naturalization laws from owning property. These laws literally stole millions from the rightful owners, preventing thousands of East Asians and South Asians from farming their lands and feeding their families. Racism is the father of race, said MacArthur genius Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's not the other way around. Racism was necessary in the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, the so-called Age of Enlightenment, for Europeans to subjugate Africans, North and South Americans, and Asians, to commit genocide and enslave millions. Difference in phenotype, color of one's skin, the shape of one's eyes, the texture of one's hair, offered justification for this mass dehumanization. In racism, the fear and scapegoating of Japanese Americans justified the dehumanization here in Manzanar and in 10 other detention facilities. And it led at the same time to the kidnapping of thousands of Japanese Latin Americans from their homes in Peru, Costa Rica, Panama, and Brazil by the U.S. government, and their subsequent incarceration here in the United States. People who were left out of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, individuals whom I had the honor to represent as part of the pro bono legal team in the 1990s, the brave women and men whom we at Campaign for Justice advocated to obtain an apology and $5,000 in reparations. But it is not racism alone, but also misogyny and imperialism. Misogyny that played a part in the passing of the Page Act and in the 2020 murders of 6 Asian women in Atlanta who were fetishized and hypersexualized by a white supremacist. American imperialism, along with that of the British and Australians, prevented South Asians from leaving British India. Imperialism led to the overthrow of leaders and occupation of Hawaii, Samoa, and other Pacific islands. And the desires for empire are at the roots of much of the competition today with China, which in turn has led to scapegoating of Chinese scientists. And the racism, misogyny, and imperialism are putting Asian Americans today in harm's way, leading to verbal harassment against queer AAPIs, physical assaults against our elders, and workplace discrimination against women in our communities. In a recent survey Stop AAPI Hate did with the University of Chicago, we found that almost 50% of our community members, that is 10 to 12 million individuals across our nation, have experienced anti-Asian hate in just the past few years. 10 to 12 million. Growing up in Montgomery, Alabama in the 70s and the 80s, I know too well what racism looks like. My mother experienced workplace discrimination, not being hired at a local hospital despite her qualifications. She was asked by a white male interview panel, "Why do you foreigners come to the U.S. and take all of our jobs?" Needless to say, she didn't get the position. And when I was in 11th grade, my AP American History teacher asked my classmates if I should be interned if America was at war with India. 24 out of my 25 classmates, many of whom I considered my friends, voted to incarcerate me simply because of my race. And that was as it should be, my teacher emphasized, defending the executive order of 9066. And so for me, past may very well be prologue. Incarceration of Asian Americans, this time potentially Muslims, Sikhs, and South Asians, may happen again in just a few years. Alien land laws are once again weaving their way through the legislatures of Texas, Montana, Virginia, and Georgia today. And with the banning of books that discuss race, the whitewashing of American history, and the suppression of votes and insurrection attempts at our capital, the U.S. seems to be on a slow road to fascism. But while race has been used to subjugate millions across our globe, it has also been used as a unifying force for political power. La Raza, the movement for Black Lives, have brought together Latinx Americans, African Americans, and for us, for whom the very term Asian American is still aspirational, we are unifying under the broad umbrella of AAPI to assert our political power, to fight anti-Asian hate, and also anti-Blackness, and also Islamophobia, and also anti-immigrant sentiment. And with our community support, we at Stop AAPI Hate are advocating for ethnic studies in school, for true community safety solutions like living wage, like reparations, like school equity, and for enhanced civil rights protections, and working to change policy at local, state, and federal levels. We, as AAPIs, are making our voices heard. Japanese American women here at Manzanar endured much hardship, and they also spoke out against the tyranny. And like them, AAPI activists across communities such as Grace Lee Boggs, Kala Bagai, and Yuri Kochiyama have shown us the way, solidarity and allyship on the way to liberation. And after the Atlanta shooting, I saw so many ammas and titas, nenes in the streets, marching all across our country and speaking out against violence and hate and claiming the rights due to them as Americans. And in just the past 2 years, countless Asian American Pacific Islander women are running for office and winning, from LA to Sacramento to Washington, D.C. They, the young and old Asian American and Pacific Islander women and men, are our promise. Being in this space with you today gives me hope. Knowing of the resistance, seeing the resilience, the Manzanar pilgrimage allows me to believe in the idea of America. I want to close my remarks with the wise words of one of my favorite poets, Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free. Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Thank you very much.